work for Directional. I was born in Luton, raised in Luton, lived my whole life in Luton. So I'm going to talk about my kind of high school experience. So when I left my primary school, I was this happy, carefree girl, like loving life, and I went to Stocksy High School and I entered a world I'd never seen before. I entered a world where it was tracksuits, gold chains, JD bags. I was a little punky kid, like I had pink in my hair, and I suddenly entered a world where I had to change. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but it was that crucial moment where I needed to fit in. So from year 7, I kind of really luckily was part of the cool group, but I kind of was rolling with people that were up to things that I'd never really experienced before. So from sort of year 8, girls were talking about having sex, going forward people were taking drugs, and I was just like, okay, is this what we're meant to be doing at this stage? Luckily I didn't get involved, but it was all around me. So I kind of spent my whole school life pretending to be someone that I wasn't, just to kind of keep up with everyone and be a part of it without having to be an outcast, because that was the worst thing for me. I didn't want to be alone. So I went through my whole high school, got through it, but I hated school. Like, I hated it. Every day I hated going. There would be days where I would refuse. My mum would be like dragging me into school. But there was no support in school for people like me because I was kind of quiet and just got on with it. So I got through high school, I was fine, I was academic, I got my GCSEs and everything was good, but I then was let out into the world, this really unconfident girl, not really knowing who I wanted to be. But I got an apprenticeship in hairdressing and I met a guy. He was 10 years older than me and he was not a very nice person. He was involved in drugs and selling drugs, but I thought I was a big grown woman, and my family knew that he wasn't a very nice person and really tried to get me to get away from him, but I was stomping my feet thinking I was a big grown woman, knowing what I could do, and kind of stayed in this relationship that was toxic, but I hadn't really been taught about relationships in school. There was this guy, he had money, he bought me perfume, he took me here, there and everywhere, but it was all bad money. And I was really naive, and I didn't get involved with him, but I kind of was around that stuff a lot, and it changed my perspective on the world and made me feel like, oh my God, actually, everything's quite dark. I'd never seen it so dark before. But luckily I had a really, really good family who helped support me through that. And I got out of it quite quickly, luckily. And I was a barber, so I was working in the barbers I worked there for 10 years. And during that time, I met my children's father, and I'd fancied him since I was like 13, like proper fancied him. And compared to the guy I was with before, he was like God's gift. He was amazing, and I was in awe of him actually. But I was still not a strong, confident person, so I kind of followed him and looked up to him, and my life spiraled quickly in a good way. I had my first son when I was 21, and then I had my second son at 24. But during this time of our relationship, there were red flags along the way, but I didn't feel that they were that big, and kind of just went through life. There was cheating and kind of disrespect towards me as a person, but here and there. And then as our relationship went on, this kind of got more and more. His mental health deteriorated, so I don't know if anyone's lived with someone or been in a relationship with someone who's suffered from their mental health. As a partner of someone with mental health, that's really quite difficult, especially when they have narcissism traits alongside it. So I was trying to help support him in his life. At the same time, I was working 3 to 4 jobs because he wasn't working. I was raising my 2 boys and trying to keep his life going, trying to keep a house running, trying to get work, get the money in. And during this time, actually, is when I started working with young people. I felt like I'd been doing barbering for a long time, and I'd got to like 24, 25 and felt I needed a new venture. So I was volunteering in mentoring for the Greenhouse project. I don't know if anyone's worked with them before, but that was an amazing starting point for me to see the young people of Luton and get my feet in. And I was working in a youth club and I was like loving it, and I thought, right, this is me. So I dedicated all my time, spare time, alongside being a mother, being a partner, running a house, focusing on me for once. During this time, he then was my husband. We got married, we had a beautiful wedding. His mental health deteriorated massively. He got sectioned, and so I was still trying to look after my kids and do all of this, whilst having to try and help him. Unfortunately, with his mental health, I was his, not punching bag, he never hit me, but I had to take all his negativity and take that on for myself. So I was in the house on eggshells every day for about 2 years. Anything I did or said to try and help him was a negative. He didn't know how I could help young people if I couldn't help him. I wasn't good enough at keeping the house clean, sorting the boys out, although I was running and doing this all on my own whilst trying to support him. Unfortunately, our relationship did break down due to many things, but the final point was the risk of my life with him, because he was getting worse and worse, and I had to put my sons first. So at that point I left. I was homeless. My mum took me and my boys in. We were living in a bedroom, sharing a bed for 6 months. But during this time I worked in school. I had started as a inclusion worker, which was like interventions with kids who had sort of behaviour issues. But what I seemed to find straight away is all the kids who were naughty all had things going on, every single one of them. But in the school system, they couldn't see past their behaviour. It was only their actions, whereas I saw past it all the time. And I built that relationship with them and find out what was going on and actually try and help them. So then I moved up to being a safeguarding lead, so I could actually put the work in, because I felt that the safeguarding team at the time wasn't doing it properly, so I wanted to do it myself. So I worked with so many young people in the schools who were being abused, were witnessing DV, who were not being looked after properly, or were just really low self-confidence, like massive extremes. It wasn't always kids who had come from a bad home life. A lot of our kids that I've worked with come from really normal family lives. It's their surroundings and their friendships and how they're growing up. So I was doing this work in the school and I was like, this isn't enough. Like, I can't do it properly. I can't, because I'd be pulled here, there and everywhere. In a school, it goes crazy. You could be working with one person, then the safeguarding call comes through, and then someone's being kicked out of a class, and this is happening, and you are being pulled around. And I was like, no, I'm not helping them right. Like, I can't do what I need to do best. So I had to take 6 weeks out of work for my mental health. Where my relationship had broken down and I'd moved into my mum's, I eventually got myself a house and got everything together, moved into my new house in the October. Then it was Christmas and I think I was on like pilot. I was on overdrive. I was just like, right, work, kids, money, food, dinner, and then it got to Christmas when we had a break and I think everything just hit me at once. My whole last few years just all came rushing back to me and I was like, no, I'm a broken person. I've been, kind of someone said it earlier about not being yourself, just being in the room, but not being. So I was just running and yeah, it hit me massively and I didn't want to be here anymore. I kind of got to the point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I am trying and constantly getting knocked back and it's too much. So I took a big break off of work. Luckily, they were very supportive. And when I went back to work, I thought, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to do it properly because I don't want any young people going through what I've been through without that support from being young. So then Directional had a job going up. I'd already seen Directional from day one. I knew Jermaine, so I'd been following it. And the job came up and I was like, yes, I'm going for it. And luckily got it, so I started in September. Oh my gosh, it's been the best, what would be, 6 months of my life. So now, amazing routine. I can take my kids to school, do my work, pick them up, and everything's just bliss. But the work I do is one-on-one mentoring with kids in schools and group work. But a lot of the kids I work with in school, teachers are like, oh yeah, they're naughty, they're truant, da da da. The first few kids I worked with, within 3 sessions, they told me things they'd never told anyone before. And so I actually got the ball rolling with getting them the support they needed for them traumas, boys and girls. Actually, a lot of boys that I work with are growing up in households witnessing DV, or raised by a single mum who's struggling and has seen her go through troubles, or not in with their family, they're in care. And I was working it after a few months, I rang Jermaine and I was like, we need to do something more, because although I can do this support, I need the tools to actually help them with their trauma. So Jermaine's put me on a trauma-focused CBT course. So this is being nearly completed. I'm nearly done with it. I shouldn't be done with it now, but nearly there. So this will be a service that we can offer. It will be based on actually processing their trauma. We have services like CAMS and CHUMS, which are amazing, but they're so overrun, and the waiting list can be up to a year. So as Directional, we will be able to offer this service as well, in schools and out of schools. And so my main focus with all young people is to help build their resilience and confidence and self-worth before they leave school, teach them things like coercive control, healthy relationships, gang culture, everything they need to know that they don't get taught, so they've got them tools as they leave school, so they're not lost and just left to start adult life without knowing anything. So yeah, that's why I do what I do.
Sorry, I hate public speaking. I've never done it before, so if I mumble or anything, I apologise. But my name is Lorna, and I'm the safeguarding lead at Directional. I'll kind of spin off from what Charlotte said, and I'll start with like my story. So growing up, I grew up in St Albans till I was about 6 or 7, and then my mum and dad split up, and then we moved to Luton. My mum then got remarried into a new relationship, and yeah, I have 2 brothers now who obviously I never had, and they are kind of like my role models. But yeah, growing up, moved to Luton and kind of started a brand new school. Didn't know anyone from Luton and went to South Luton High School and kind of got thrown in the deep end and had to meet new people and be this little girl from St Albans that nobody knew, and everyone was like, where are you from? Why are you here? And asking all these questions, and I was kind of like a fish out of water. I didn't know where I stood in this brand new town, and I ended up trying to fit in with a lot of young females that were the popular group, and I didn't really know where else to go with that, and I was just following their lead. I was going off on what they were doing, so they were like, let's do this, and I was getting into trouble. And on a weekend I'd be like, Mum, can I go to town? And I'd be going out and we'd be asking people on the stand on the like street corner and asking them, can you get us a bottle of this, can we get them this? And I was like drinking in parks at the age of 13 and just trying to fit in, and yeah, was getting up to no good, and ended up getting arrested at the age of 13. Had to get my mum to pick me up from the police station. The policeman said, how old are you? And I was like, how old do you have to be so you don't tell my mum? And he was like, he said 16. I was like, so I'm 16 then. And he was like, oh, are you? And I was like, no, I'm 13. So ended up having to get my mum to come down to the police station with my sister to pick me up, and the look that I got given, if looks could kill, I would not be here right now. She gave me a death stare, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And she ended up making the policeman send me through the whole shebang. So take my fingerprints, take my DNA. And I was like, why is this happening? I've only robbed from Boots, I'm sorry. And yeah, and it got to like mid-high school, and I was like, this isn't me. Like, this isn't the girl that I've been taught to be by my mum. And it was kind of, I've seen a lot growing up with my mum, so I saw my dad abuse my mum physically and emotionally, and then see that in her new relationship as well, and I was like, this isn't me. So I ended up kind of turning my life around in high school and like sailed through a couple of years, sailed through college, and then it got to uni, and my dad was like, don't go to uni, you'll waste your time. And I was like, well, now you said that, I'm going to go. I didn't want to go to uni, I just went just to annoy him. So I studied sports coaching at uni for 3 years, and I didn't really enjoy it. I just went for the fun. I was up in Liverpool, and it was just really to annoy him. And growing up with my dad, he was emotionally abusive to me as well. I don't know if he realised he was doing it. So I would go to there on a weekend and he'd be like, you're fat, you're this, you're that. And obviously I was in awe of my dad, and I was like, I'm his little girl, like why is he saying this? Like maybe I am too big, maybe this isn't me. And I would always go on a diet or go and do this or try and do this, and I would play football to impress him, even though I never wanted to play football. Then when I started playing football, I loved it. But I would do all these things to impress someone that, although I know he loved me and cared for me, realistically was horrible. So I went to uni, studied for 3 years, ended up getting a 2-1 in sports coaching. I was 1% off a first. I'm still going to contest it to this day. But yeah, come out of uni and ended up working a lot of dead-end jobs. So I was working in a pub, I was working in a care home. So I'd go to the care home 9 till 4 and then go to a pub 6 till 1 a.m. every day just to get by, because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And then my personal trainer at the time said to me, there's a job going, like someone I know, there's a job going, and it was for Directional. And I was like, I'll just apply. Like, I don't actually know what I want to do with my life. I don't really know where I'm going. I don't want to be a sports coach because I don't want to stand out in the cold and tell young kids to kick the ball about. I don't like the cold, I wasn't going to do it. So I ended up working all these jobs, and I just was like, I don't know what I want to do. And I ended up applying for the job. And in my interview, I was very honest with Jermaine about everything that happened. And he kind of was looking at me, and I was like, I'm just going to be real with you right now because I've got nothing to lose. Like, I've got a job, but I don't want to do it, but if you don't give me the job, it's fine. And but here I am, still in the job 3 years later. But yeah, I kind of fell into this job, and I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I've never worked with young people. I don't really know how to speak to young people. So I've got 2 nephews, so I can deal with little kids and be crazy and be an auntie, but to actually educate young people, I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I went in and thought, how can I make a difference? Because there wasn't much going on. And back when I was in uni, I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety when my granddad passed away. And I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to cope with what was going on in my head at the time. So I would just get up every day and ignore it. But then I would come home and have a panic attack, and I would rip chunks of my hair up because I didn't know how to cope. So I was like, I need to educate young people on mental health and self-awareness and growth and how to grow yourself as a person, because I didn't know how to do that. So when I learned how to do that, I thought I can educate these young people on how to do that themselves. And that's kind of what I did. And kind of a year into being into Directional, I ended up being homeless. I got kicked out of my house I was living in, and I ended up sofa surfing for 6 months. I was going to work every day and thinking about, where am I going to go tonight? Who am I going to ring, and whose sofa am I going to sleep on? So I was ringing up my best friend saying, can I stay at yours tonight? Can I do this? Can I do this? And just ringing up all my friends and just figuring out where to get my head down so I could get up and go to work the next day and not smell, so I could have a shower in the morning. But I wouldn't have got through that period in my life if I didn't work for Directional, because the people that I'm surrounded with in my job have taught me to be an even stronger person than I already was. So dealing with the adversity that I did growing up, I was like, hey, I need to be strong-minded and I need to be strong-willed. But being around all these people that have their own stories and listening to their stories taught me to be an even stronger, strong-minded woman that I can then portray onto other people. So now in Directional, I make it my key focus to educate young people on mental health, self-awareness, growth. I do diversity and equality, and I also educate them on violence against women and young females. So all of these topics that I cover, I always go into my mental health lesson. I'm like, hands up in the room if anyone's been educated on mental health in school. And probably about one young person puts their hand up, and I'm like, great. So we're starting clean slate, but it's not taught that much in mainstream education. So I make it my goal to educate these young people on things that they need to know about. So things in everyday life that they're going to face, that if they don't understand it, it's going to be confusing, because I was never taught about it when I was young. And it confused me when I got a diagnosis, because I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. Why how have you put a label on what's going on in my brain? But then the more I researched and looked into it, it made sense. So this is why I make it my mission to educate young people on all of these things within society and within the world. But yeah, so obviously within Directional, we now have 2 alternative learning provisions, one in Barton and one in Luton. And then we work in the schools across Luton as well. So obviously Charlotte touched on that she deals with groups and does one-to-one mentoring, and obviously we've got staff all across the schools in Luton, and we've just reached max capacity on our Barton provision. So we now currently can't accept any more young people, but we are now educating the young people of Luton of all the things that are really, really important.
These guys are amazing, aren't they? And listen, I don't really know what they're going to say. I don't know what to say. I said you just need to be you and authentic, and it's been recorded, so you'll get to see how amazing, honestly, you are. So Lorna and Charlotte from Directional.